In a post Baldur's Gate 3 world, I do think that RPG devs are shooting themselves in the foot by not including romance options in their video games. Yo, what's good? It's been Stora. As February of this year has kicked off, we're now starting to see gaming ramp up for 2025. This month is absolutely stacked with some great titles that I personally am really looking forward to, like Civ 7 and Die in the Dungeon. But easily my most anticipated title of this month and one of my most for this year is Avowed, a semi-open world, choice-driven RPG made by Obsidian Entertainment, a game which takes place in their Pillars of Eternity setting. It's a game many are comparing to Skyrim in order to convey, just at a base level, what it might play like. Now, Obsidian puts out some phenomenal RPGs, okay? Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2 are beloved among CRPG fans, but it's Avowed specifically, which has inspired me to make this video and present y'all with this discussion / question of, do RPGs need to have romance? Because it was revealed a good while ago that Avowed is not gonna have romance options or a romance system present. For me, at least for choice-driven RPGs that I've been looking forward to, whenever news drops that said game isn't gonna have romance options or whatever in the game, it always comes off as a bit of a bummer for me. I felt the same back when I was following the news cycle for The Outer Worlds, another choice-driven RPG made by Obsidian, and they revealed that game wouldn't have romance in it either. However, I want to make it perfectly clear that for this discussion, I'm mostly talking about choice-driven RPGs and or CRPG style games specifically, right? And that I don't need to have romance in these games in order for me to play or enjoy them. I really liked my time with The Outer Worlds since I just mentioned it. Even if the game wasn't particularly memorable for me, I still think it's a mad solid RPG, worthy of at least a single playthrough, easy like 8 out of 10, you know? But when I do think back on the RPG titles that are memorable for me, those that I'm most fond of, oftentimes the really great romances are some of the first things that pop into my mind when I'm thinking about those games. I definitely attribute my love of RPGs, both video games and TTRPG, to Dragon Age Origins. That game is why I'm still, to this day, obsessed with high fantasy. And when I think back on that title, easily one of the first things that pops into my head is Morgan and my warden's relationship with her. I've replayed the game several times, including recently, and while I have my issue with Origins, it's not a perfect game. The Morgan romance specifically is not one of those issues. On the contrary, it's easily one of the strongest points of the title, and Morgan is still in my top companions of all time across all RPGs list, okay? Not just for the romance with her, but just because of her as a person and companion. Morgan's companion quest and individual backstory are very compelling. She's incredibly likable and has some of the best lines in the game. Her banter is always a treat. Her relationship with Flemeth is complex and interesting. She's drop dead gorgeous. I mean, I could go on and on about the character. I obviously have a lot of love for her, you know? Same goes with Mass Effect, Tali in that game, Divinity Original Sin 2, and Losa, Wrath of the Righteous, and Arushale, Panam from Cyberpunk 2077, Cassandra from Inquisition, Harding from Vanguard, Shodi from Pillars of Eternity 2, and more. But the ones I just mentioned are romances and characters I really had an amazing time with. But for me, when talking about the best of the best, I gotta talk about Shadowheart and Karlach from Baldur's Gate 3. I mean, look, okay, I love all of the companions in that game. Their stories are phenomenal, and even as a straight dude, Astarian's quest brought me to tears when it came to an end during my first playthrough. But those two companions specifically, again, Shadowheart and Karlach, and the romantic relationships the player can have with them are easily some of, if not the best romances I've ever experienced in an RPG or even story, all right? So much so that I describe them as a highlight to the game of BG3 itself. For all the other aspects the game is mind-blowing in, its romance options and how they play out are right up there, boxing with all these other aspects, you know what I mean? And that's kind of the whole crux of this discussion for me in terms of my stance on things. While such options, again, they're not a requirement for me to enjoy an RPG, from hearing how I talk about them, it should be quite clear that they elevate the experience for me. RPGs in which they're present, I do enjoy more, and ones where they're absent, I tend to enjoy less, just to be as honest as possible. Speaking to Baldur's Gate 3 specifically, you heard me say it in the video's intro, and I stand by this statement. In a post Baldur's Gate 3 world, I do think that RPG devs are shooting themselves in the foot by not including romance options in their video games, plain and simple. Now, obviously, that game was a cultural phenomenon. It is not the rule. We can't expect that kind of success always. I don't think we're gonna see anything like that game's explosive impact from a CRPG for quite some time. Honestly, probably not until Larian themselves release their next big RPG, whatever that ends up being, right? And of course, I'm not trying to say every title in the genre needs this stuff. I get it. For some stories, it just doesn't fit. Also, a good relationship system and compelling options within said system ain't easy to pull off. It takes incredible writers and talented devs to do it even just a bit right, you know? But let's not kid ourselves. A big reason for why Baldur's Gate 3 blew up was because clips regarding the game's romance options had started going viral and ended up circling throughout social media. Whether you, I, whoever likes it or not, regardless of what kind of RPG fan you are, from the diehard, super hardcore, old school CRPG fan, all the way to the new school fans where recent titles like Divinity Original Sin 2 got you into the genre, it is undeniable that Baldur's Gate 3 romance is a big factor as to the RPG genre getting a good bit more popular lately, especially for CRPGs, and the massive success of that game itself. People just plain and simple love a good romantic story, especially ones that they can participate in / insert themselves into. If it just so happens that such stories take place in the middle of games with awesome combat and great RPG systems that are heavily choice-based, in which you're on a journey to save the world or something, then all the better, right? I mean, I understand the camp of players that don't enjoy this kind of stuff in these games for sure. I get that, but the great thing is that it's optional in these titles. Me personally, I want more games like Baldur's Gate 3 in the future. More amazing choice-driven RPGs, you know, with good production quality. Now, all of them need to be on the level of BG3 for visuals or whatever. I think Owlcat's Pathfinder games look dope, and Solasta 2 is looking solid graphically, at least when compared to the first game. It looks so much better. But the truth is, if we want these RPGs, right, like we want them, so they need to be successful in order for them to stick around and for more to be made in the future. So while devs, you know, should definitely set out with making a great game as the primary objective, success is important to consider too, is all I'm trying to say. Thanks to BG3, this genre has a larger player base than ever before. Even back, you know, from back in the day, like with Star Wars, Knights of the Old Republic, romance has been a part of many of the titles within the genre, a part that many fans have loved about it since then. But now more than ever, this new wave of fans is gonna crave good romance options and systems in their RPGs. And with games like Baldur's Gate 3 and Owlcat's Pathfinder games being their introductions to the genre, hell, I really can't blame them. So ultimately, for me, to just get to the bottom of it and answer the question of, do RPGs need romance? I'm gonna outright say not necessarily. Like I said, I've enjoyed games without it. Not just the Outer Worlds, but also RPGs like Wasteland 3 and Fallout New Vegas. Also, I've played RPGs that do include these systems and options, but what was there ended up not being anything special. I mean, Starfield's romance was dry. Think Sahara Desert, times it by 10, bone dry. And while not as bad, Fallout 4 was, let's be real, a similar experience. It wasn't like amazing or anything in that regard. However, I do firmly believe that compelling and interesting romance options alongside a good system to support it, including things like dates, gift giving, and awesome dialogue options / acknowledgement surrounding the relationship can heavily elevate an RPG. I mean, to step out of the realm of video games for just a second into the world of anime, Dandadan was massively popular and beloved during its first season run it just had. An anime that, well, yes, is primarily, I'd say, a shonen title with its flashy fights, yokai, ghosts, aliens, funny moments, and even its own power system. Its romance subplot can go toe to toe with some of the best fully dedicated romance or shoujo anime. I've seen videos of longtime anime fans gushing about it, but saying things like they've always been strictly into action shows. But for Dandadan, it was Dandadan, yeah. It was the potential relationship between the two main characters that really pulled them in and which they found endearing. Getting back on track, I also believe that romance is synonymous with the RPG genre, as even if it's an optional feature / system in these games, the ones that are regarded as the best RPGs of all time damn near all have romance included in them, especially those within the choice-driven and CRPG categories, which is again intended to be the focus of this discussion for the most part. I mean, when you're chatting with someone about these kinds of games, the great cast of companions each of them has is definitely gonna come up. You're gonna talk about who your favorite companion was, which of their quests you enjoyed the most, and by extension, the conversation is likely to head towards who you each ended up in a relationship with within these games. At some point, the conversation is gonna head there. Whenever I'm at a con or some kind of, I guess you could say nerd gathering, and I'm wearing a shirt or have some merch from a certain video game, a certain RPG, and me and just a random fellow fan getting to talking about it, it always heads that way, whether I bring it up or not. For me personally, I do think a given choice-driven or CRPG is going to be better for including quality romance. I say this as someone who's married too. I'm not just some single loser who lives through these games. You know what I'm saying? My wife and I have been together for 11 years now this month. 8 years married, 11 years together in total, right? And we both enjoy romance in these kinds of games. We like I guess you could say that, kind of discussing and gushing about options and choices the other person made and just geeking out about it. And we're completely monogamous. It's similar to us enjoying a good romantic movie or anime together, But I'm really curious as to what you all think now that I've discussed this for a while. Are RPGs more enjoyable for you when great romance is present as an option for you to engage with while playing the game, or does it not really matter much to you? Be sure to let me know your thoughts in the comments. As always, I'm Mistora. I appreciate you watching the video, and I'll catch you on the next one. Be easy.